Coming up on show 801, today it's a Saturday special interview as we talk about the one thing that every EV owner and potential EV driver has in common. It's EV insurance. Well, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. My name is Martyn Lee and a return to a Saturday special interview series. Today we're talking about the one thing that unites every EV driver and potential electric vehicle owner. Plenty of people get tribal with my car's better than your car debates. But when it comes to insurance, well, we've all got to have it. And actually, we don't talk about it very much. And there's lots of things around this as well, like what about the driving test? And young people will be learning to drive in non-combustion cars. And what does that mean? Will their insurance be higher or lower? And what kind of test will happen with electric vehicles? Because let's face it, they're pretty high-tech cars. And in some ways, should the driving test be amended or changed for insurance purposes? And how do those insurance companies work with all the various different things like government bodies and the car makers, and of course even some car makers like Tesla doing insurance themselves? That's been in the news this week. So let's tackle all of that with our guest today. He is Tom Clark, the head of electric vehicle strategy at LVGI. Welcome to EV News Daily, Tom.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
It's good to have you on. Let's start with, so obviously anyone listening around the world, this is a global podcast. LV is an insurance company, and funnily enough, it's an insurance company about a 5-minute drive from my house. LV actually has a head of electric vehicle strategy, which is you. Day to day, what do you work on then?
So a lot of my time is looking at the market. So, what do we think's happening? How can we offer products and services for electric vehicle customers? And it really started just over a year ago now. We launched what is still the first product in the market that's designed specifically for electric car owners. So electric cars present a really unique opportunity to design a product that deals with the needs of the consumer who's got an electric car. So as well as your core insurance, for example, if you run out of charge, we'll take you to the nearest charge point. Things like your charging cables are covered, your home charge point, because believe it or not, people do crash into their home charge points. Things like your battery, even if it's leased. So some insurers don't cover a leased battery. Less of an issue now, but on the older Zoes, that's something that people can get caught out by. And if you choose to have a hire car, it'll be an electric one. We've designed this proposition for our customers, and that it's really resonated, and we've had a huge uptake in it. But also, we looked at the entire value chain. So electric cars to repair are different than a petrol and diesel. There's no oil to replace, right? You need to look at different things. So therefore, you need to have different qualifications. So level 3, level 4 qualifications for repairers, which they've got. You need to have different tools. You need to have insulated matting, insulated gloves, even a hook to pull someone off a car should they electrocute themselves. So you've got to have that in the repair. So we've built all that so make sure we can properly repair these cars. So we've got that offering in the market. Like I said, we've had a great uptake. We've had a number of people who've used the piece where they've run out of charge. They've been taken to the nearest charge point. So those customers have really appreciated having that. And if you claim on that, that doesn't affect your no claims discount. It doesn't affect your premium or any of those sorts of pieces. So we've really tried to design it from a customer first perspective.
Really interesting you say about running out of electricity. One of the most common concerns about an EV from someone that's never driven one, and I think I saw this survey 10 years ago and last week, and it hasn't changed. It's always in the top 3. People worry about running out of electricity. And so I always say to the people, look, it's no different to running out of petrol or diesel. Just don't run out. But it's not quite. I'm being a little bit flippant when I say that, because the guessometer on EVs does fluctuate according to how you've driven recently, and even different EVs. Like, Teslas have their algorithm according to how far the car will go. Other EVs are based on the most recent driving styles and things like that. So did you find when you were researching electric car insurance to put on the market that this is something that people asked for? Or is it a case of, people don't know what they don't know, that you had to take this product to market and then people go, oh, I didn't know I needed that? Kind of, was it chicken or egg, or was it a bit of both?
It was a bit of both. We did a lot of consumer research to understand not only the concerns of EV owners, but the concerns of future EV owners. So we're looking at, the mass market. So eventually everyone will own an electric car. So how can we as an insurer aid that adoption, support that adoption? One of the biggest fears, you're completely right, is the car won't travel far enough. I'm going to run out of charge. And we considered kind of, well, what can we do about that? And actually, this cover is just to help that anxiety. Most people won't use it, but for those who do, they're really grateful they've got it. And it's also one of those things you only do once.
Yes.
So it's a little bit chicken and egg and trying to work through that. And again, with this whole product, we went back through kind of what's the first principles of the consumer experience. So one of the other things we've done is partner with the guys at ZapMap. So the ZapMap is on LV website. We've taken all their tools. And that was because when we looked at the customer experience of owning an EV, the first thing you do is buy it. The second thing you're going to do is insure it. And the third thing you're going to do is, and where can I charge it? So we're like, well, okay, how can we help with that element? So really going back to that customer experience, customer journey.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I drive a Zoe. I'm on my second Zoe now. And so mentioning no names, when I felt my first Zoe and called around and I've been on the forums and the Facebook groups, and I'm a nerd and I'd researched it, but a lot of people don't. And I was calling around other insurers and asking about the battery lease. And it had gone from just a blank silence to people saying, don't worry about it, it's not a problem. But I knew that if, for what, 1 in a million chance the car gets written off, Renault or RCI Finance, they want their money back for the battery that I'm leasing off them. I was responsible for insuring that. So again, it's great that you think about things like that. In terms of EVs, generally, it's fair to say they are slightly more expensive cars at the moment. Now, the price is coming down, and also not everyone's driving £100,000 Tesla. But does that mean generally that people are insuring more expensive cars? Are people paying more for insurance for EVs? Because early adopters always take a little bit of a hit sometimes, like if you want the first iPhone that's out.
Yeah, and there has been a premium on electric cars, and it really depends by make and model. So I'll put Tesla to one side because Tesla, as always, are a special case. But you're not talking a huge difference. So if we look at something like a Nissan Leaf versus a Nissan Micra on your average premium, it's about a £10 difference. They are more expensive to repair. And it really depends between make and model of car where things like the charge port is. So if the charge port is right at the front of the car, it's obviously in an area that's more likely to be hit. Therefore, there's cost to replace that. If it's on the side of the car, like a more traditional petrol cap, something like an Audi e-tron, for example, on the side, it's slightly more protected, less likely to be hit. And that reflects in the kind of insurance premium. The biggest chunk of any insurance premium is actually you as a person, and the biggest cost for any insurer is the personal injury claim. So these have an impact, but it's not as big as people expect it to be.
I'd never even considered the factor of where the charge port is, and obviously some expensive electrical bits around that, would even impact on if you had a collision. Man, that's amazing. I'd never even considered that. I would say, by the way, that as someone who parks their car in a driveway but not garaged, is 42, married, this EV is the cheapest car I've ever had to insure. Admittedly, in my history, fast Skodas, Audi TT, and things like that. But now it's I'm not comparing apples to apples, but from my personal experience, my EV, it's incredibly cheap in my eyes to insure what is a car that was a brand new car last summer that I own completely, and I protect it. It's my baby, right? So EVs are different to combustion cars in many ways. In many other ways, they're just a car that happens to run on electric, but they are different. Things like regen, they only have one gear. They're very connected, very high tech. Is this something that you find that there's a bit of a language barrier at the moment? And if so, how are you getting around that?
Absolutely. One of the key things we've identified is around how do we educate our customers? We all want to do our piece to support kind of the zero emission target. And I read a report this week saying I think if all cars were converted to a zero emission in the UK, it would reduce UK emissions by I think like 12 or 13%. So the potential is huge. And we do have to do an education piece because people have got very traditional views of electric cars. Your listeners will probably be in that lovely bubble that I love speaking to who are really passionate, understand the benefits. But I remember doing an event last year with the guys at Go Ultra Low at Country File Live. These are just people that know nothing about EVs, and they're asking questions like, well, isn't it slow like a milk float? Because that's like, for them, that's their understanding of electric vehicle is a milk float. So it's kind of dispelling those sort of myths. And I know some people get frustrated because they've been saying the same thing for 10 years. But I think now that's beginning to change, where you've got massive motor manufacturers like VW bringing out things like the ID3, you've got the Honda E, and you've got a lot more discussion of electric cars. So we're beginning to break down those conversations. But equally, we need to explain, let's be honest, charging is more complicated. There's no two ways about it in terms of, for someone who their whole life has driven a petrol diesel car, they know it takes them about 8 minutes to fill up at the petrol station. Well, when you try and explain to them, well, actually, if you plug it in overnight on a 7 kilowatt charger, that's going to take you 5 to 6 hours, depending on the battery. Or if you've got, say, your Zoe, which will do 22 kilowatts, that's faster. Or if you're on a ultra rapid, etc., etc. So there is a little bit of explaining, and we've done some education pieces and articles on that. We've also, tried to look wider than that as well. So we did a piece a few months back looking at the driving test, which is a really interesting one, because you've got to start to look at the entire ecosystem of the car. Because it's no good if you've got a driving test and the kind of examiner goes to you and goes, in your Renault Zoe, show me where your oil is for your dip check, which is one of the show me, tell me questions. It's not there. Equally, some of the tests and the maneuvers on the parking, for example, if you're reverse parking or parallel parking, well, a lot of these cars will do that. You can push a button and it will do it for you, and it's becoming smarter and smarter. And that's not just EVs, that's just the ADAS, the advanced driver systems that are coming into these vehicles. So really we need to be thinking about the entire ecosystem of the car and working out how can we change things. You talked about the fact you can drive some of these cars with just one pedal, let alone the lack of gears. So how do you therefore educate the driving examiners and change the tests and look at it holistically?
Well, that's interesting. So how do, as an insurer, how do you work with those different stakeholders? Because there's plenty. There's from central government and lobbying bodies to the industry to the DVSA, like you say, and so how do you? Because insurance is at the centre of all, so much of this EV movement, because, like I said at the start of the podcast, it's something we all have to have, but it's probably not the first thing on people's minds. So, but you must be having those conversations because you deal with all of those different stakeholders. So, how have you been doing that, and how could that go forward in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been, speaking with a lot of these stakeholders, like you say. So obviously, Department for Transport, Treasury, Go Ultra Low, and the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, and really just trying to bring some of our experience and knowledge of what our customers are telling us. We now insure 1 in 5 of every electric car in the UK. That's battery electric car. So we've got a huge amount of experience in that space, and we're really keen to listen to that customer feedback. So feeding that through, raising those issues with the right people. When there's workshops we can engage, we really are trying to be as proactive as possible, and equally having conversations like this for yourself, where explaining not only our own viewpoint but listening to others. Listening to someone like yourself, like Robert Llewellyn on Fully Charged. There's a whole array of really smart people talking about this. So as well as giving our own views, we're really proactive in trying to listen and take that in with these stakeholders.
That's interesting. On the podcast, I can shoot my mouth off at what I think about things, because the 2040 ban, which was first proposed, and then journalists said to the people that had made the announcement, oh, so electric cars, do you mean electrified or hybrid or plug-ins? They were like, well, we'll get back to you. A couple of months later, government came back and said, oh, what we mean is this. It means plug-in cars, and it means this, and it's 2040, but it could be 2035. And obviously, there was Grant Shapps went on Radio 4 and said, oh, it could be 2030. Now, clearly, you have to take a more considered and a more collaborative approach. But so as an insurer, how do you do that? Because at times, the messaging to the general public can be confusing and frustrating. So how do you ensure that you're engaging in the right conversations, but also that you're up to date with things as well, and that it is a difficult challenge?
Absolutely. And I think that 2040 ban is a great example. So there's a consultation at the moment that the Department for Transport's running. We will do a submission as part of that. We've got a view of where we think that should be. I think everyone's agreed it's got to be earlier than 2040. There's much more appetite for it. So it is definitely a balancing act, because we're also in a regulated space. We actually have two regulators. We have the PRA and the FCA. We are trying to always bring it back to the consumer and what is the right thing for the consumer, and then communicating that to the stakeholders. But there is a pragmatic view, and it's working through the middle of the right thing for the consumer, the environment, the economy as a whole.
Insurance is something that we all have to have, and whilst we can shop around the marketplace for insurance, no secret that the younger you are, the more expensive insurance is. So coming back to the driving test again, so you guys have been thinking about this, as I gave my age away a little while ago on the podcast. When I first started to drive, my first car was a Fiat Uno. It cost no money to insure. I kind of hear stories now of people passing their test, and it's certainly different to my first few years of driving and building up my no claims. How could this change the way perhaps that your industry, that insurance works? Because, as you say, with things like driver protection systems, high-tech cars, collision avoidance, that must make things safer all the time. And I guess what I'm angling towards is hoping that we all pay a little bit less on our premiums.
That there is a very complicated question. But
oh no, we haven't got time.
No. But I will break that down. There's a couple of points there that I'll just pull out. So you're right in terms of the ADAS systems are getting better all the time. Nissan with their ProPilot is a really good system. They will reduce the frequency of crashes. There is a flip side to that, which says that when they do crash, though, they are more expensive to repair. So you've gone from a headlight costing £100 to replace up to £1,000 to replace, because of the sensors in them. They're also being a combination of different materials used in construction. So, for example, the Audi e-tron is glued. It's not welded in the same way. And therefore, that has an impact on cost. So you will get some benefit in the reduction of likelihood of crashing, and that's going to improve all the time. And that will see a reduction in premium, but it's going to be offset to a degree by cost of repairing these vehicles. So it's a balancing act, really. In terms of kind of that young driver piece, there is lots of options out there in the market that are targeting young drivers. What you're seeing is more telematics policies, and there are insurers out there that specialize in that space. And what I think you'll see going forward is not so much adding a telematics black box to a car, but these connected cars. These cars have got so much data coming off them all the time that rather than having to kind of activate something, you'll just tell the car to send your insurer the data, and it will do that, and that will have an impact on your premium. So for insurers, I think there's a couple of other things we can look at, and EVs present a real opportunity for us to position ourselves differently, be offering services that create real value for the customer. So going back to the EV product, that if you run out of charge at the nearest charge point, that's something that is beyond the core insurance product, and it's around how can we build out those ecosystem of consumer services that consumers are going to want to see, as also industries emerging. We're seeing EDF sell cars. We're seeing Tesla get an energy license to be an energy provider on vehicle to grid. We're seeing these industries coming together, which insurance has a really interesting place within, and therefore gives us a real opportunity to offer real consumer-focused services.
We talk about green number plates. Not sure how I feel about that in terms of singling out EVs for special treatment. I don't know if that helps the PR campaign in terms of those people who aren't on board with them. But what about even like green L plates? So to signify that someone's learning in an electric car.
There's lots of things you can look at in terms of incentivizing people. I think green L plates is quite an interesting idea in terms of making people aware that they're in that sort of car. So, for example, just being that bit more forgiving in terms of how they're driving. You might have someone, and I'm terrible for doing this when I'm driving an EV, I coast up to the lights to get as much regen braking as possible, which I get told off by my other half for doing it all the time. She hates it. It might be useful to have that to be a bit more forgiving. I think, the point around green number plates to treat them differently doesn't really work in the sense that if you go to a lot of car parks now, you get free parking if you're charging your EV anyway, because they're subsidised by kind of Go Ultra Low. Using them for bus lanes, which is one of the other ideas, I'm not sure how that would work either, because ultimately you want to incentivise the bus and you want to incentivise cycling. We really want to incentivise people to move to EV, but if you're going to be environmentally friendly as possible,
an electric bus is a nice compromise.
Exactly.
On that. Before we finish off, you obviously have to be forward-looking. You're talking about how young people and how people passing their driving test are going to need to learn EVs differently. But at what point, and we've seen the Go Ultra Low campaign in this country, where the electric car just becomes the car. It becomes normalised. It's really hard to predict. Every year I read those studies that, the last 10 years, battery prices have come down from $1,000 per kilowatt hour to $100 around now, maybe even less. And then every time someone releases this is going to happen next year, it's normally beaten, it's faster and cheaper. So looking forward 5 or 10 years is really hard, but as a business you need to. So how do you navigate that? It's almost impossible.
It keeps me busy, let's put it that way, in terms of trying to work through when that's going to be. And I think there's a couple of things that happen. You're right, the battery costs are coming down all the time. That said, electric cars, when compared to a petrol and diesel equivalent in most cases, are a lot more expensive. So there is a bit of sticker shock from consumers if they're looking at something like a Renault Clio, which is maybe 14,000, 15,000, and then look at a Renault Zoe, and they go, why would I pay all that extra for the Zoe versus the Clio? Even if you tell them how cheap it is to run, and kind of if you're on something like an Octopus Agile tariff, you could be paid to charge your car and all these things, they're still going to look at that headline price. So it's really hard knowing the tipping point is, but we are seeing that steady increase. I think the real big thing this year will be the VW ID3. I think we're going to see a big uptake there. We saw obviously a big uptake in the Model 3 last year and saw a big jump in the number of people using that car, to the point that's actually in terms of the cars we insure, that's the second most popular car we now insure, are the EVs. So I think in a couple of years, we will be at that mainstream tipping point where I think it will very quickly move. Within 5 years, I think very quickly the majority of people will move to buying electric rather than petrol or diesel.
Technology happens so fast. I remember working in a business 10 years ago, a bit more, and we all had BlackBerries. It was a Canadian business, to be fair. BlackBerry was a Canadian company, but we all had BlackBerries, and the idea of not having that would be entirely alien. And yet within a couple of years, we all had iPhones, because technology happens so much faster than anybody really thinks. Hey, look, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to find out more, they can visit the website, lv.com. There's a car insurance section, obviously, and then under that is electric car insurance and all the things on there that we talked about, Tom, even the myth-busting. Chances are you and I and people listening to this podcast maybe a little more knowledgeable or picked things up over the years, but even that whole kind of, can you take an electric car through the car wash thing, some cool videos to watch, on that page. Thank you for your time. And worth saying as well, by the way, in no way is this kind of a paid promotion or me promoting anyone in particular. I just want to talk about insurance, and I'm really grateful for Tom's time to come on and fill us in on what's happening in their industry. Tom, thank you so much for joining us on EV News Daily.
Thanks a lot, Martin.
Well, a quick reminder of Question of the Week this week. It's all about critics who say EVs are too expensive for the average person. I'm not driving a £100,000 Tesla right now. I'm not sure about you. However, that question of affordable EVs is one that does divide people. So I'd like to know from you, what do you think affordable means? What is an affordable EV? I'll read out your answers on Sunday's podcast. You can email me hello@evnewsdaily.com or leave a comment on the YouTube show. And as I forget to say sometimes, you can always go to the website, and on the contact form there, you can email me direct from evnewsdaily.com if you wish to do that. Let me know your thoughts. Read them out on Sunday. Thank you as always to our Patreon partners of the show, premium partners: Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby, Avid Technology, Brightsmith Group for Clean Tech Talent, Porsche of the Village, Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, and now Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East. Thank you very much for all of your continued support. Find out what Patreon's all about at patreon.com/EV News Daily. Any reviews you can always pop on to Apple Podcasts are gratefully received, because it really helps me grow the show if you can write a few words about what you think about this, but no worries if not. Hey, in the meantime, have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. Oh, and do remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.